Yeah, that particular order, sequenced order, sequenced order, the order in which an event occurs at the completion of a magnetic circuit in a time-space vector. Aaron needed some money, and guess what he was asking? 3. Okay. So I mentioned to him that my electrons are on a restricted account. So he asked me if I had any cash. I said, yeah, let me check. So I said, yeah, I got 9. 27, right? So I mentioned to him, because he's very computer literate, he knows what an application program interface is. He knows what a virus is. So that's why I have certain levels of conversations with Aaron. So, for example, there's 2 other people that live up in this house. That when I have conversations with Aaron, they won't understand what the hell we're talking about, right? So you're talking about computer, right? Processors, chips. So I use certain terminologies because of, if you will, what we call computer literate or math literacy. So I try and keep it simple like I did when I was 4 years of age. As complex as the math can actually appear, right? One of the ways in which I translate it is when I used to see professors at major universities, like, just name one, Oxford, if you like, Ivy League type schools, and you see how much time and energy that they spend running all of these symbols, which are character maps. Anybody that's in the computer sciences knows what a character map is on a keyboard. And what is a key? It's a tone, a sound, a note. And so when you're androgynous as a polarity integrator, obviously you want all the lines of communication that represent the symbols, which represent the sounds, the electrified sound, and the light field, the primal sound and light field, to be in a state of what? Perfect balance, right? So that you're experiencing the least amount of work to experience what? Eternity, eternal unconditional love. So that means that every line of communication between all the molecules, the spirit molecules, and the elements are all experiencing what we are, which is eternal living spirit. So I've mentioned this before, and I've mentioned that the math actually works for you, so that you don't have to think about it. You don't need to get up on a blackboard and run all these numbers in parentheses and brackets and n equals this and all the rest of that. Calculus, if you will, trigonometry, Euclidean algebra, all the rest of that, right? Because I can remember a time when I was in what's called a research methods class at the University of Arkansas, where the professor was working for the National Institute of Health, where she had been involved in a number of studies, right? So when you get into the studies, right, and you want to, if you will, map and model what you think is what we call a potential. So when you have infinite potential possibilities, what do we call those? Variables. Right? And so now we get into the extension of the complex number space between negative magnetic polarity, negative electrons, if you will, current, and the positive. Now we're back to poles and polar. Right? So now we're back to the axial spin rotation of a Merkaba that is in perfect balance, which means there is no distortions within the entire template. 0 errors. That means that we're all communicating with each other through the grid, right? In an APIN network, in matter phase experiences, it is in perfect balance with the law of one. Okay. So you see how that works across an APIN network, and something that is chasing electrons on a hamster wheel getting nowhere fast. And the simple way to translate that is the next time you pull up to I used to do this a lot. Not a lot, but a fair amount, depending on where I was at. But for example, I was in Reno, Nevada one time, sitting on a park bench. Actually, it was a bus bench. And so what I was doing was I was counting cars and waving with a smile, saying, "Hey, how you doing?" Right? To see how many wave backs I would get. And then see if I could actually read that they were experiencing what I was experiencing, which was experiencing being in a state of love and joy. The dance for being free in spirit. And so you can sort of see how that works on whether, and I experienced this as a child, because you can read it. You can read the frequencies, which means, as another example, I own a store. 10 people work for me in that store. So you know how the coconut wireless works with word of mouth, because it travels fast. When people are involved in the exchange rate of electrons between loss and gain, right, in a planetary Merkaba system, particularly with hydrogen, right? So it's like I have something in here in matter form at this density, and so you're willing to give me paper, if you will, or use a magnetic strip in which you want what? You know, a hat, right? A pogo stick. You want to buy some bananas, you know. So now we're into value. So when I was a child, I was value tagging the same way that Walmart will put tags, price tags on matter. And this is what it's going to cost you in electronic numbers in order to acquire what you're now going to put in memory, because you're wanting to put that in memory, right? So now we can get into booting up or triggering what? Endorphins. Right? What we used to call a kick. Now you get into what we call energy junkies, right? Energy management, information management, visual mathematical code, right? Management, to maintain balance between the two poles. So we can measure that by the exchange rate of what? Energy. Loss and gain of electrons. You know? Self-generating power stations, you know, self-generating plasma waves. And so you sort of see how the cage works. It's a cage, you know, like a hamster wheel cage, on the acceleration of needing to chase more electrons as a result of holding more matter in memory that is holding us captive to chasing those electrons, which is the electrical density of the consciousness that is experiencing itself at that level of density, right? And so you can see it if you're sitting at a bench and you're observing a four-way intersection tetrahedron, seeing any city or suburb, if you will, and just notice, musical notes, notice when people pull up, right, to a stop sign. They don't even bother to stop. They'll do the least amount of energy or work in energy to not have to come to a complete stop, so that they're still experiencing, which means they're still feeling that there has been no complete stop, like putting your vehicle in stop mode. No, I got to make sure that I'm still going so that I can get to where it is that I'm going in other time-space vectors, to get there as fast as I can, because I'm trying to be free. Because I realize that my energy, the electrons, protons, neutrons, is being held captive because I'm running on a hamster wheel, trying to chase up to get to zero, right? So that I'm experiencing eternity. So I'm running behind schedule. So I'm trying to play catch up. Right? So you realize how this impacts what? The central neural ions, the nerve centers, right? The 7 nerve centers. Now you're back into the rainbow bridge, you know, the medicine wheel, the color wheel. And so you can see how people will, you know, pull up to where it says stop. That's a direction finder, you know, running a gyrodome. And now you have an order, a rule. that says, stop your engine, stop your engine, stop the movement. So that's a rule-based function, running that rule. So now you obey the rule, right? So if there wasn't anybody around, and as you're approaching that four-way intersection, you can't see anybody going, if you will, east and west on that line, and you can see to your left and to your right, that there isn't anybody coming towards you at that four-way intersection tetrahedron, let's say coming from the other side, right, from the north side, and you're going to travel south, and there's that stop sign, right? You realize, hey, there isn't any reason in terms of safety or a collision for me to have to stop and follow that rule. Why was that rule put in place? So that there wouldn't be a collision with a tetrahedron. Bang. Collision course. Gyroscopes. Magnetic gyroscopes. The compass heading. Now we're back to the center point of a cross, right? It's spinning discs. Discs. So it's really disc management, right? Like a CD-ROM or a DVD, right? Or if you will, we can go back to 45s when they were playing vinyl records, right? Because the one that my folks had, my parents had, was using a needle. Just like the, Seattle needle in up there in Washington State. What was it called? The Needle Dome, the needle, the Seattle needle. And that was a disc up on top, right, with a vertical bar. And so the 45s and the 33s, 33 and a third, that my sister had in records, right, when I was just a little boy, was being played on what? A phone, a PH, a phonograph, graphing, a phonograph. And it had what was known as a diamond stylus needle. Right? So now you're hearing the sound coming out of what? A horn. And so these are all translatable skills, and another way that you can tie sort of the information that I share with everybody as to, if you want to think of it as precision, because this went through my mind this morning about a beautiful video that the Voyagers put up about future memories. Right? I knew as a child, this is an illusion. So you have a past event, a current event, and a future event, which is the event horizon. Horizons. Surveyors will tell you a lot about what horizon is. Surveyors, remember the surveyor craft was put up by NASA? Surveying the universe, which is mapping the universe. I did a video on that one, what it's like to map the terrain, mapping the consciousness terrain. So you're experiencing the imbalance, right, between the poles. So you want to maintain balance, right, between the poles so that the consciousness is not shifting out of balance, right? And so when I was about 17 years of age, out of all the fire stations that I could have been put at, now we're at potential variables, it just happened to be at the time that I became aware of there was an opening, which is an open vector. A time-space vector was open for my energy to be in that particular time-space vector, which would have been September of 1970, where I was put at that particular location where there just happened to be what? A weather station. Yeah. So now we're into heat, fuel, right? And topography. Topography, which is a geography of heat and fuel, gas, of a tetrahedron. Because the reason the particular station that I ended up with, where there was an open space that allowed me to be able to go into that space vector, happened to have a weather station there. And so this is where I was learning, because I had an interest in how they were running the numbers, which is an electrically dynamically linked indexing, right, of the elements, the elementals, how the elementals work together. So when you think of hydrogen, right, nitrogen, helium, or if you will, the atmospheric rivers, crystalline atmospheric rivers, the auroras, right? And so here I am learning through taking weather every day how the isobars, which is the frame rate speed in a reality stream, has very much to do with what we call humidity, right? Fuel moisture, moisture contact. Now we're into condensate, like a condenser, on your automobile. Biovoltage as it relates to condensation. And then you can sort of put this into what we call states of consciousness, right? Being in a gaseous state of consciousness, right? So you realize what happens, for example, an experience that I had, when you compress, what? Nitrogen, right? From a gas to what? A liquid. So what happened one day was a tractor trailer rig that was carrying 2 tanks of liquid nitrogen, and it got punctured. Now that liquid nitrogen, which is a cryogenic, right? And there were a number of firefighters that were now, guess what? 3 feet of liquid nitrogen. So that's like shattered crystal. Whoa, just broken into pieces. See? So now we're back to what? Compression and expansion of consciousness between different states, different physical states, which are matter states, which are formatting codes, 4 fire codes, which are fire letters, which are symbols that represent music, musical notes, tones, frequencies, vibration and frequencies, right? So this, you can sort of see how this sort of works, how I ended up at that particular station to assimilate the codes, particularly as it related to the 1970 document that came out by the DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Project, so the Pentagon. The Pentagon had provided the U.S. Forest Service a document that essentially gave them their marching orders, which means that conduct a study because we are going to weaponize the spirit of fire, right, against humanity. So the Forest Service itself now became, through the units of consciousness that represent those that work for the U.S. Forest Service, are now engaged as a formation of consciousness through which they're connected as nodes in the network on a motherboard, okay, to participate, what? In crimes against the law of one. Crimes against God. They're at war against God. See? So you realize how this sort of works between one and the other, right? Or the living and the dead, or living water and dead water zones. And so you can see how you can put that together on the center point of a cross between, north, east, south, and west, right? And now we're back into axial lines of communication and the spin rate speed, right? So of falling, rising stars, falling stars, loss and gain across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. So that's what I was experiencing when I was a little boy, is the loss and gain. And so now you get into futures. And that's why I love that video, because it talked about future memories, which is the focus or the intention of our energy in order to experience something next that we're using our energy for now to experience. And then learning how that works with manifestation of the reality field that we're now experiencing that we weren't experiencing before, by virtue of what we're experiencing now versus what we want to experience next, which is the intentional use of our energy to experience what that is in energy, right? So anyway, I thought I'd just share these little pieces, of crystals that are all coming together for us to be able to experience the purity of our energy, which is the purity of our consciousness, to experience the purity of our love that we have for everything that is alive and living in the cosmos, right? Because therefore we become a reflection of what you are, which is what love is. And so that would be a universe of consciousness, a galaxy of consciousness is now experiencing what love is. Right? So you're getting all the energy that you need. That means that nobody's on a hamster wheel chasing electrons no more. Right? Imagine that. Have a great day. I love you all. Be good to yourselves. Beloveds.